Jonathan, again, go-to guy. We were supposed to have David Holt, who's the CEO of Asbury, a huge deal in its own right. And Asbury, just looking at the numbers, 177 dealerships across 15 states. Here locally, that's like Nally, among others. Really a big deal. One of the largest private or public, in their case they're public, dealership groups in the country. But again, my mention of the real world, hey, this is what happens, is David got stuck. And we get a double bonus. So he didn't send one replacement, he sent 2 replacements. And as Jonathan tells me, not just one good one, 2 good ones. If you're smelling butter, yes, a little butter. But thank you on short notice, of course. Michael Welch, the CFO of Asbury, and then Chris Reeves, the treasurer of Asbury. And they're gonna have a nice little kind of fireside chat after Jonathan gives a little bit of an overview. So enough about me. Without further ado, Jonathan, Michael, and Chris.
Okay.
Meant to be a conversation all along. My own. Good. This has been a crazy year. So we originally envisioned inviting David, who is at the advisory board for the Atlanta Fed and is a regular participant in giving feedback to the Atlanta Fed. And I thought, well, what a perfect year to talk about all of the massive changes that have been happening in the U.S. economy and the auto market, and to have this not just be about automotive, but really about retail and about leading a large and growing company in this really challenging environment. And I've had the pleasure of seeing David speak a few times recently. He was just recognized as an all-star in the automotive industry back just last month in September in Detroit. So we were set up to just have a back and forth conversation. Originally, I drafted a few questions and said, this is the way that I would see this discussion going, and David responded and said, well, I want to ask you some questions too. And I was like, well, let me clarify. Do you mean you want to ask them right now, or you want to ask them the day of? So we want to carry that spirit into the discussion today. I've known Chris for longer than I've known Michael, but I have observed Michael because Michael is more than 25-year veteran of automotive retail. You've been with Asbury for a little over 4 years.
Yes.
But prior to that, he spent over 20 years at Group 1, another public and growing very large automotive retailer. And Chris was actually here at Cox for several years that we overlapped before you moved over and joined Asbury. So we have the opportunity to talk about things that are about the auto industry, and frankly, there's plenty to talk about for the crazy year that we've had. We also, I think you guys, in terms of the credit trends you're seeing and what's happening with retail and the consumer, have a very good perspective of the consumer more broadly, and especially maybe some differences you're seeing with some of the changes that are happening across the country. The auto market is also ground zero for massive changes that are happening, first with trade. So with the tariffs that really targeted auto almost before anything else. And we're starting to see changes related to that, but it's been slow in coming, I would argue, from what we've seen so far. And then we've also had massive regulatory changes. The most significant in the last quarter was the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill Act that basically eliminated the EV tax credits and was one of many reasons why the third quarter was a very strong quarter and certainly a record quarter for EV sales in the country. So that's sort of the smorgasbord of topics that we can get into, but I'd love to just start things off and ask Michael and Chris, you can jump in as well. What were you thinking when we entered this year, and how does that compare to how things have really turned out?
I'd like to say that we predicted this, but that'd be a bold lie. We came into this year announcing a large acquisition. And so we basically announced publicly that we're doing a large acquisition in Boston, and immediately thereafter, all the tariff stuff hit. And so now you're stuck, we're gonna take on a ton of debt to buy a large acquisition going into extreme uncertainty. And so we went from kind of feeling good about an acquisition and being able to launch that and do that well to like, are we going to be able to raise all the money? Are we going to be able to get all the mortgages done? Are the banks going to support us? And so it was really challenging in the spring with all the uncertainty. And then April hits, and it's like the largest sales month of the year and a crazy high number. And it looks really good, but you still have all this uncertainty. So it's just been, we went from kind of 25 was going to be, so the car business, we go through COVID. As you guys know, if you bought a car, you pay MSRP for the car during COVID. Car dealerships are making tons of money, so it's a really good couple years for us. But the business has been coming down in terms of profitability just because the profit per unit comes down. And so 25, 26 was kind of the low point of where you're going to kind of get back to normal. And so we'd ride 25 and 26 into that low point, and then 26 and beyond, you kind of get back to normal business. So that was just where we were on the track, and then tariffs hit and blow it all up and restart the clock. And so it's been a very, as you guys imagine from all the other businesses, it's just been a tough year to figure out what the future looks like and how to plan for it. And then doing a massive acquisition in the middle of it's been just challenging.
An added piece of fun.
We at Asbury, we like fun, and fun's like really close to like very painful. Is kind of the definition. But if you're growing, if you're pushing on the business, you're always kind of pushing the edge and trying to, get better and grow the company. And so it just adds complexities and challenges to the business model.
And is my recollection correct that you guys have actually had the most acquisition growth over the last 2 years?
Over the last 2 years, for sure. Over the last 4 years, us and Lithia are the two that had the most growth. On your question for this year, we predicted low 16s like you did. I think we'll be 100% correct for the year, but we had high 17 million SAR and 15 million SAR, and they just happened to average out to hit the number we projected. So I wouldn't say that we got it right, but it's going to look good on paper at the end.
Yeah, although I kind of feel like the momentum is moving in the wrong direction in the short term. The data that we review week to week on the retail market basically showed that the summer we had a frenzy of activity, as you described, when the tariff announcements occurred. So March was fantastic, April was fantastic. May started to soften as evidence of really some of that strength in March and April was pull ahead. June essentially was the same, and it was really looking like, okay, this thing could really slow down. But really July had momentum picking up again, and I think there were several things on why that was happening, but it was real, and certainly the EV tax credits expiring played a role July, August, and September. But we already in the second half of September, we're starting to see in our retail numbers, which is the whole country, really slowing down in the second half of September. So much so that the last week of September was one of the only weeks this year that we sold fewer vehicles than we did a year ago. And so the momentum has definitely shifted. And the kind of key question is, what do we think the fourth quarter is likely to turn out to be? And we think it'll end up being the slowest quarter of the year, which is very abnormal for the automotive market, because usually you have a very strong fourth quarter, and it's the very beginning of the year that is weaker. But I'm interested in if you guys are seeing the same pattern.
I'd say we largely agree with that, with the caveat being we rode the wave. The summer was so volatile in part because every time you'd get commentary from Trump about different tariff policy, folks would rush in off the sidelines to buy, thinking they had to get it by this date because there was a drop dead on when the tariffs are going to be applied. And so I think there has been a ton of pull ahead volume, specifically with EVs in the current quarter. But we're kind of one tariff announcement away from, perhaps another pull forward ahead into year end. But our base assumption is that the fourth quarter is, a good bit weaker than we've seen year to date. And then December for us and our business really comes down to the last 2 weeks of the month. And so we saw that last year with Trump coming into office, and December was historically strong for us. That'll be a tough comp to lap. But I do agree that October, November will be tougher, with December, hopefully on the bright side with the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, obviously the tariffs are sort of the elephant in the room to talk about. I think there was a lot of fretting. My song selection back in March was "It's the End of the World as We Know It," and I feel fine. And that's really kind of been the theme song for the whole year for the automotive market. But I would argue that what you've seen so far is not necessarily an indication of where we're going next, because the manufacturers have been put in a very competitively difficult spot. And I think what we're seeing across industries is actually when tariffs are implemented, especially when there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding whether those tariffs are going to stick, whether there's legal authority to have the tariffs, it just creates a level of the first response is no response from manufacturers. But these guys have a front row seat of a portfolio that includes every brand, including exotics, in your mix, and therefore I think have a great venue to help us understand maybe differences that they're seeing. I'll just set the stage to describe that I've been using the metaphor of manufacturers have been playing a multi-dimensional chess game, but they can't see all the boards they're playing on, and they're playing on a table that's tilted. So the pieces keep moving around on them. And as a result, I think that has made them very cautious about making any moves that potentially make them uncompetitive in the segments. Because in the automotive business, the real competition is at a segment level. And our read of the data and the exposure to tariffs, both on the parts side and on the where the vehicle's assembled, and the tariffs that apply to imported vehicles, essentially makes it so that no segment in the country has the same level playing field for all of the players. So there's a lot of portfolio decisions that effectively are immensely complicated by the tariff situation. And I'm really curious, what are you seeing? What is your perspective? Are there some manufacturers that unequivocally have an advantage and you already see actions to that end? And then, are there others that you would describe in a really difficult spot?
Yeah, it's been interesting. And our world is made up of model years. And so if you think about it, they announced the 25 model years and the pricing for those vehicles typically in the spring. And so in our case, the 26 models are coming out. That pricing would have been announced last spring. And you'd kind of know, hey, the new 3 Series BMW is going to cost this much when 26 comes out. We still don't know what the 26s are going to cost, the final price. Now we've gotten some of them and there's a price tag on it, but it's not final. It may move. And so that's what we're talking about is they usually don't kind of adjust the price until you get to the next model year. So we've been selling 25s, so we haven't felt it, neither has the consumer. And now we're starting to get 26s and those will have the tariff impact. But to Jonathan's point, every OEM has vehicles, some are heavily tariffed, some have no tariff. And they have to look at their portfolio, and on the tariff car, their competitor may have no tariff. And so on that specific car, they're not competitive. But on another car, they don't have the tariff impact somebody else does. And so they take the total portfolio, say this is my hit for the company, and how do I allocate that among the cars? And so they're not applying the tariff on a specific car that has the tariff impact, They're saying which car can handle the tariff. And so, for you, if you buy a M Series BMW, you can probably handle the tariff better than somebody else that's buying a 3 Series BMW. And so they're having to shift all those around, but they don't know what the other players are going to do. So BMW doesn't want to come out and say we'll raise price 10%, and then Mercedes says we're going to keep it flat. So they're all kind of doing this and going, I don't want to be first out there showing my cards, but they have to somehow absorb that hit of the tariffs, and they don't know if it's going to stick or if it's going to go away or where it's going to shake out. Is it going to be 10% or 25%? And so it's just a really tough environment for them. And for us, the hard part is the consumer. If you think about the average, you can quote me on the right number, but the average price of a new car is $50,000. And that's up from, I think, $33,000 back in 2019. So it's a massive increase in the average price of the car. And we all say, where's the breaking point where the consumer's like, I can't spend it, I'm out.
Yeah.
And so you don't know where that breaking point is, where the demand you don't have it anymore. And so they're having to figure out, are we close? Do I have a couple grand to play with, or am I stuck? And then to make it worse, the consumer's getting hit with tariffs on everything else. And so they're getting, their portfolio they can spend on cars is shrinking as well. And so you just have a bunch of factors going into how do you set the price of a car. And it's not like it's like, well, we got a little bit hard and the demand dropped off a little bit. There's going to come a point on a car where people won't buy it. And so your demand curve is not like it slopes off, it just falls off.
Yep.
And so they got to be very careful. And when that happens, that's when they have to discount the cars and do all those things. And so they're in a very tough place of not knowing what the tariff impact is going to be and not knowing what other players are going to do with it, and trying to price the car to keep the consumer engaged.
Yeah.
And our bad part is we're a franchisee, and so we have no say in the matter. We're just along for the ride, and the OEM is going to tell us what the price is, and we're going to try to sell it to the consumer, and we have to be that bridge to try to get the consumer in the car. And so it's been a very challenging, and I agree with you, the fourth quarter is going to be very tough. 26 is probably going to be tough. And we're expecting much lower sales than if you would have asked me the same question 6 months ago.
Yeah. And I do think the OEMs have acknowledged the consumer is kind of at the top, like 50K is, you can't go much higher than that. And so they're going to have to be very creative on how they apply the tariff across the different models and where they can push and where they can't. And I think that's part of why you haven't seen the 26 model year pricing come out, is because I don't know that they know where they're ultimately going to land.
Yeah, and the other complexity that we see in the tariffs is they're not evenly landing on segments or price points. And ironically, the tariffs have much of a greater impact on the most affordable vehicles. So the math basically works out to say the largest percentage cost impact is on compact cars and subcompact crossovers, which are high volume segments, mostly landing in vehicles under 30,000. But when you slice the data by the price point, the highest price cost impact is all the vehicles under 30,000. Mm-hmm. And so the challenge there becomes, can you even pass along any cost increase and still have that vehicle viable to a consumer that's stretching to afford a $30,000 vehicle? A 13% increase on 30 makes it above 30 and potentially out of that segment. Which brings up, these guys are masters of managing a portfolio strategically. I think we've got a great opportunity to ask them about some of the acquisitions that they've been doing, because you've been selectively choosing key markets around the country, the most recent being Boston and the Northeast. Atlanta was early in your strategy, but DC is featured in recent months. The Mountain West has played a role in that. And I'm curious if you see enough data so far from the tariff that it's influencing your opinion about which brands you'd prefer to be overweighted in your portfolio, or maybe some brands that you think should be deliberately underweighted. Because when they do acquisitions, they also do divestitures along the way too. And I think a lot can be learned about managing this industry from really the portfolio approach you guys take.
Yeah, and I'll go back on the acquisition side. So if you go back to 2009 or 2018, we were a Southeast regional player. We had 80 stores kind of in the Southeast. And at that point, you're going to be acquired. You're just going to get picked up by one of the big groups. And so we went and looked at the U.S. map and said, hey, what are the markets that long-term you want to be in? And we had great markets like Atlanta. We had great markets in Florida that you already had circled, but we looked and said Dallas, Texas is one that's really a luxury brand market. The Mountain West, so Denver, Phoenix, Utah, those were markets that don't have a lot of dealerships, so they're great for the dealership space. Franchise laws are pretty good. We had Washington, D.C. circled. We had Boston circled. And so there were some strategic markets that we looked at and said, hey, we want to go out and buy groups in those markets because that's where we want to be long term. And again, Atlanta was already on the map, so that made it easy because we already had that one circled and checked off. So we went aggressively and went out and purchased groups in Dallas, in the Mountain West. Those were growth markets for us, and we look at franchise laws are important, population growth is important, money to be able to spend on dealerships, number of dealerships per people is important because if it's too many dealerships, you don't make enough money in each dealership. So all those things matter as we circle those buckets. And so we bought all those. DC and Boston were more, I'll call, strategic portfolio management from a recession case. In a recession, some of those growth markets don't do as well. DC we thought was recession proof. The last year has maybe changed our outlook on DC a little bit. It's been a little tough market. And then Boston historically has been a good market for recession proof because of the universities. Again, this year has kind of messed up that theory. But those were kind of the reasons for it. But this tariff stuff, what it's done is some of those markets you look at, and so California for us is a market that's really, really tough from a car market perspective, where they're pushing on EVs, all those things. And so we had 2 stores out west. And you look at the tariffs and you say all those marginal markets that you're kind of like, we're there, but should we be? And you're asking yourself those questions. When the tariffs come along and kind of mess up what you're thinking about the future, you sell off those markets. And so we sold our stuff in California. We're looking at a few other markets that are question mark markets, and we're making the decision to exit those markets. And so it just forces you to say this market is very strategic and we want to be there. This market's on the edge. We need to go ahead and dispose of it now versus waiting to see what the tariffs do to it.
Yeah. I mean, so far we have not had any major announcements by manufacturers outside of EVs. There's been a few announcements in the EV space about models being postponed or eliminated, or certainly production being reduced. But you've not had any manufacturer say, that's it, I'm throwing in the towel. Mm-hmm. But when you look across the brands, you have zero impact from tariffs or very close to it, to an effective tariff rate of about 15% on a good number of the manufacturers. So it's an uneven playing field. Are there any manufacturers that you think are particularly well positioned in this environment, that everything's going right for them in addition to the tariffs? We just had Ford, who looks like a well positioned, just had disproportionately uses more aluminum. Yep. And aluminum has been a part of the tariffs as well, but then their major aluminum source had a major fire this week, and that has dramatically changed the outlook for Ford in the short term. So I'm just curious your read of the brands and any assessment that you have about winners and losers so far.
I mean, you just look at the ones that are historically strong and consistent. So the Toyotas of the world, the Lexus of the world, they just typically weather uncertainty better. Nissans, the Korean brands, some of those, they have their ups and downs. And so you just want that brand that's makes good decisions. I mean, Toyota's the one that, if you think about EVs, everybody leaned in and we're like, we're going to go all EVs by whatever year. And they were like, we need to slow down. The demand's not there and the infrastructure's not there. Maybe they were proven right, but those people that historically have made great decisions, historically have weathered the storms well, those are the ones you lean in on because they just do the right things. But to your point, it'll be interesting. There's going to be some models that an OEM just can't build. The tariffs are just going to make it where you just have to look and say, we physically can't build and sell those models. It doesn't work. Yeah. And that will come out. I mean, that's a 2 or 3 year decision, so it's not, pull the plug instantly. But that will be the tough one, is what do they, when they think about their production and what they're going to build in 3 years from now, what do they put on the roadmap for what they're going to build that handles the tariff well? Yeah. And they can't just, I mean, this is the crazy thing about tariffs. You can't build a factory in 9 months. Like, it takes years and years and years to build a factory. And so they can't flip the switch. And any factory that gets opened in the next year was already going to be open. Like, the tariff didn't cause it to open. And so there's no way to quickly move your production onshore. And so that's the hard part they're going to have. And maybe they get credit if they say they're going to build a factory, they get a decrease on the tariffs, but there's no way to overcome their tariff exposure today.
Yeah. Production location is not always the best measure of what your tariff impact is going to be. BMW is a great example of that. They build a ton of cars in Spartanburg, but if you look at the content of those vehicles, 85% of the cost of that vehicle is sourced from parts that are overseas. Right. And so, they build them here, but the tariff impact on those vehicles is going to be penalizing.
Yeah. Very complicated.
Very.
And still evolving, and I think will continue to. So let's broaden it a little bit and talk about the consumer and your viewpoint just as a retailer. What are the trends that you're seeing with the consumer and where some of this strength has been this summer?
Yeah, I mean, for us, if you go back to COVID, big savings. Everyone had huge savings accounts. And all the credit losses on bank loans were going down. And so that's what we kind of experienced during COVID. They've been coming back up. We're still, subprime's getting close to 19 levels, maybe going through it pretty soon. The prime customer's still in good shape. Most of our customers are prime customers. We also deal a lot in the subprime. And so we're still seeing availability of credit. And in the auto space, in 08, 09, you couldn't get consumer loans. So we can't sell cars. Like, without consumer loans, we don't sell cars. And so that's the one piece of our equation. If consumer loans get dried up or get scary, the volume just drops off rapidly. And so we really have to have that. And so we're not seeing any issues. You're seeing that creep back up, but it's just getting back to normal, kind of pre-COVID levels. But that trend line needs to flatten out at some point. If it just keeps on going up and blows through it, then we'll start seeing an impact on the consumer loans. But we're seeing, the consumers are still healthy. We're seeing the price point for the lower vehicle prices. That consumer's in a tough place. They've gone through their savings, so they don't have that down payment anymore. And so that's the consumer that we're seeing it and you're feeling it on. But most of our, I'll call it prime customers, we haven't seen an impact yet from those customers.
We work with a ton of banks, obviously, to provide consumer credit for the vehicles, and they do a great job of sending us information about the length of loans that they're seeing and the changes on loan length. And I think I'm always shocked, I guess, at the amount of vehicle loans that are over $1,000 and the rate at which that's increasing. And then if I think about buying a car and the depreciation curve on a car and how long you're underwater for, and then you look at the loan terms of 84 months, 72 months, like, you obviously don't want to see that number going higher longer term, because that just puts the consumer in a difficult spot with negative equity that they have to then refinance in the next one. And so I think we're looking at that one closely. To Michael's point, we're largely real credit healthy customers. I think you naturally expect, as interest rates have kind of persistently stayed high, they would force more of their share of wallet into the price of the car and their car payment, and they would then not purchase as many kind of add-on products like extended warranties and those types of things. But we're not really seeing that. I mean, that's that business for us has remained pretty healthy and hasn't really changed over the last couple of years.
Well, and on a related note to that, an aspect of the Big Beautiful Bill made auto loan interest deductible for the first time since the 80s. But it has to be an American-made vehicle. And right. Are you seeing any evidence of that changing anything in the F&I process?
No, because it doesn't impact the monthly payment.
Right.
because they can only get it when they do their tax return at the end of the year. And most of our consumers, the consumer doesn't come in and say, hey, I want to buy a $50,000 car. They're like, I can afford a $750 payment. And as long as you can fit the car in that payment, you're good. And so it doesn't impact that payment. So it doesn't, most of our consumers don't factor that into that. I get a tax relief at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So no impact right now.
So far, no impact.
No.
How about the other part of the business that's huge for retailers, and that is fixed operations or service and repair for people outside of the industry? I think some of the acquisitions you made, this has been a real strategic area of focus for you guys. Our data suggests that it's been a very strong year, and those dynamics are likely to continue. But what are you thinking in the service lanes?
Yeah, same. I mean, we make a little bit of margin on a new car. We make high margins on parts and service. So that's where the profit is in our parts and service business, and it's consistent. So it doesn't have the ups and downs. So you just that number just kind of repeats year after year. But especially with the acquisitions, a lot of times their focus on parts and service is not where it needs to be. And so we have to kind of lean in and help with that focus. But the cars are getting older. They're getting more complex. More of the business is coming back to the dealership. So all that paints a really good picture for parts and service at the dealership level into the future. EVs, why they've slowed down in terms of the rollout, it's still a rollout, and those EVs typically come back to the stores as well. And so we just really focus on that retention. We focus on miles in the shop. And so if I have a dealership and it averages 40,000 miles on the ROs in the shop, they're only getting the warranty business. As soon as the warranty's over, they're leaving. If I have a shop that has 95,000 miles coming through the shop, they're really doing a great job retaining that customer. And so that's our focus, is how do we retain the customer? How do we keep them coming back? How do we make it an easy process? But that business is going to be healthy for the next 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. Yeah, if you look at our business, Michael's point on car complexity, so our fixed operations business is made up of 4 components, which is customer pay, which is you go in there and you pay the bill, it's not a warranty claim. Warranty, we have a wholesale parts business, and then collision. We're seeing when vehicles are wrecked and brought in for collision, the insurance companies are just totaling them. And so our collision business has been underperforming relative to the other parts of parts and service because you do a simple fender bender in your car. Well, that thing has so many sensors in it that have got to be recalibrated and whatnot that what optically looks like a minor repair, if your car is a little bit older and has some miles on it, chances are that business is going to get totaled. And so we're seeing some declines on the collision side, but it's paying off on the warranty side as these vehicles again are so complex. The warranty rates and issues we're seeing on recalls are going up, and so that's a great opportunity for us to also upsell or bundle regular customer pay for like a while you're in there kind of a service appointment. So yeah, to Michael's point, we're real excited about that business. We've done a great job retaining the customer. We're really trying to do a better job retaining our technician talent because that's been a source of friction for the industry as a whole. It's just the technician schools and the amount of talent that they're producing have been kind of a pinch point for dealers across the industry.
But on that point, I mean, if you think about, and if any of you guys have kids that are in the college age, for years, all the kids went to college. Nobody went to the technical schools. So technicians, plumbers, electricians, all those skilled laborers, we were just getting decimated. And so we had this shrinking pool of aging technicians in there, and all the dealerships are fighting each other. So I'll pay you $5 more, next guy's gonna pay you $5 more, and it's just a race to the bottom in terms of what you're gonna pay the technicians. About probably 3 to 4 years ago, so maybe COVID, you saw a flood back to the technical schools. And so for the first time since I've been in the business in 25 years, it's starting to swing back the other way. And we're starting to see these kids come through. Now, they don't help us today because they got zero experience. They just got out of school. But we're seeing a flood back of the kids going into the technical schools. And so that just bodes well for 3 to 5 years from now when we can repopulate with the kids coming in, teach them the business. I'm not fighting over technicians. You're getting a natural increase in overall technicians. So that's a really good thing, I think, just and not just for us, but for plumbers and electricians and all that, just to have these kids going into that skilled labor bucket as opposed to everyone going to college and maybe get, I mean, a technician at one of our dealerships makes really good living. And so that flow has been really positive in the past few years.
Well, and clearly another topic that's in that labor bucket is AI. And lots of discussion, lots of debate about, well, some of the softness that we've had in the job numbers so far this year. Is AI playing a role in that? What are your observations from what you're seeing happening within Asbury?
Yeah, so we have kind of a philosophy. The software makes our people better and more efficient, taking away some of those jobs that just are just kind of redundant, not value-added jobs, but the people still make the experience. We're a high-priced ticket item, and there's an emotional connection that has to happen for someone to want to buy a car. I mean, honestly, this person has to be like, I really want that car. And you can't do that with a computer. You have to do that with a human being that makes that emotional connection. But the software makes us better. And so we're leaning into it on things like call centers, on things like back office accounting, some of those things that are just like repeated processes. And it sounds horrible, but the AI is getting good enough where an AI call center is more helpful than a human being call center in a lot of cases, and the turnover is less. And so we've leaned in on it on those specific items. Now you're just scratching the surface on what it can do and where it can help, but we truly do believe software makes our people better and makes the process more efficient, but you still have to have that human element to create that emotional connection with the customer.
Yeah. I've been shocked at how good it is and how rapidly it's progressed. It's to the point now when you're calling in to one of our call centers to establish an appointment for your vehicle, the customer's ability to respond quick enough is what slows the call down. Because when you call in, it recognizes the number, it instantly does a search on what your vehicle is and says, are you calling about your 2020 Toyota Camry? What would you like to have it brought in for? And it knows all of those things about the car. And it is phenomenal at how well it can decipher different accents and whatnot. It's really, really good. It's impressive.
I think we'll continue to see that evolve rapidly. And speaking
100%.
of which, we probably can evolve to handle some questions from the audience. And we've got Steph with the microphone. If anybody wants to raise your hand on that, I'll get us started in this, just throwing the question of, this is a company that decided to be headquartered in Atlanta. Michael moved here from Houston. What are the pros and cons about leading a large company and moving to Atlanta? What are your perspectives with all of the markets that you're buying companies in?
It's a great, and especially with buying so many dealerships in different markets in the past 4 years. I spent 25 years in Houston, Texas. Moved to Atlanta 4 years ago. I wouldn't go back. We really like Atlanta. And it's just, weather's nice, just the trees and just the location is beautiful. And I think when people come here, we have friends that come here and visit us and they're like, really? Like, this is really nice. And so I think there's just like a misconception about Atlanta when you think about people outside, and if they come and see it, they love it. Now, the negatives are the traffic's brutal. Living in Houston, we had 3 rings, not 1 ring, which helps with traffic. And then it's the largest airport in the U.S., I think is what they claim. That's because every other major city has 2. And so the airport thing's a little bit tough. And so I think there's some infrastructure stuff that makes it a little challenging. But I think it's more of just, you got to get the companies here, the people here to see it. And when they do, they love it. And that's the reason we ended up moving from the New York area down here to put our headquarters in Atlanta. 1, our operations were here. But 2, just a better place for our people to live and work. We're in the middle of moving from the Suwanee area, our headquarters, down to about a half mile from here. Personally, I hate it because I live in Suwanee. But from our people perspective, we're going to be able to pull from a massive amount of people that are all over Atlanta, instead of right now we're pulling from everybody up there in that Suwanee, kind of out the Flowery Branch area. But it's a great city. We've really enjoyed the past 4 years being here. I do think it's not a city that you naturally come to visit, and so people just hear about it but haven't experienced it. But I think it's a great place to have a company and have your employees work here and live here.
Well, welcome to our neighborhood. I'm sure UPS folks will be happy to accept you here too. And I think someone from UPS has the first question.
I saw recently that Amazon had a partnership with Hertz where they're going to try to help expand their online retail capabilities. Curious what your ideas or concerns are with online shopping for cars. What are your thoughts on Carvana? Do you all partner with online retailers?
Yeah, so if you think about the car business, if you bought a car 40 years ago or you bought a car today in a dealership, it's the same process. Like, come in, test drive the car, that's fun. Pick out your car, that's fun. Mm-hmm. Negotiate with sales, not quite as fun. And then sit there and wait for an F&I guy to come and pull you into the room and talk about what products you want and how you're going to get the financing done. You know, maybe 3.5 hours later, you walk out with your keys to the new car. That's a painful experience. And the companies like Carvana have proven that the consumer wants to transact quicker. And what we've struggled with is our people have done it the same way for 50 years. And getting people to change how they want to do things is just painful. And so we're leaning in on that online process. And what we discovered during COVID was they all leaned in to want to buy online. But now that it's over, the people still want to come into the store and test drive the car. And so we have to find a way to make the technology work where the transaction is in the hands of the consumer, that they control it. They don't get stuck in an F&I office and get confused by all the words, but it's real simple and transparent in a software program. And if you want to do it online, or you want to do it in the store, or a combination of the two, don't care. The software drives the transaction. So we've leaned in on that. But Carvana is a proof. I mean, we get cars cheaper because we get trade-ins from new cars. We have an advantage to them on just sourcing vehicles, and yet they are growing the most rapid in terms of used car sales because the consumer wants to buy a car that way. And so we have to lean in on that technology and kind of get to that where that is. The Amazon thing's interesting. They did Hyundai a while back. That's just a lead generator for the dealership. Like, you go on them, you say, I want to buy my car from Amazon, and they send you to me. So it's like, whatever. Hertz will be interesting. That's a little bit different model. So that's a used car model. But what Amazon hasn't figured out, and we talk to them all the time because we were one of the pilot stores with Hyundai, is it's one thing to sell a tube of toothpaste on the website. It's another thing to take a trade, do the financing, sell F&I products for a used car. Like, those aren't the same transactions, and they're a little bit more complicated. And so they've tried to take their Amazon model and make it work for a complicated transaction. I'm not going to bet against them because they've proven us wrong many, many years. But it's just more difficult. And but we are leaning in on that because we think the consumer wants it. They want an easier transaction. They want to be in control of the transaction. They don't want someone tricking them into buying products they didn't want. They want to have full control of the transaction, for the price to be transparent, not the haggling back and forth. So that's where we're leaning. That's where we're headed toward. We think that will make a difference in the space if we can get there.
Thank you.
So you mentioned service earlier, and that that you're seeing that there's data showing those who are returning after warranty, and of course there are some stores who aren't as successful in bringing people back after warranty's over. What does the data show that is the most significant thing that a dealership is doing that's driving that behavior? Do you know? Do you have that in the data?
Cycle time. So
Okay.
if you come in for an oil change and it takes 4 hours, you're not coming back.
Okay.
You just aren't. And then the transparency of it. So one of the things that people get hit with is you come in for service and they send you a note and say you need these 6 items. And you're like, my car seemed fine when I brought it in. What the heck happened? And so there's not a transparent process for you seeing the aging of your car. And so we try to give everybody a full inspection, a video of that inspection, a red, a green, yellow, red inspection piece.
Yep.
And if I can show you that it was green this visit. It's green the next visit. It's yellow the following visit. And you see the pictures of that evolution. When I get to say that it's red and you need to fix this item, I built the trust to say that we didn't just hit you with something. And so it's that trust factor that you have with us, and then it's the cycle time that we do it timely.
Okay.
And that's the two pieces we break it down. And then we are horrible at communication. If you call a dealership and say, is my car ready? And nobody answers, you're not happy. And if you call 3 times and nobody answers, and you're just like, I brought it in for an oil change, it should take 45 minutes, it's 3 hours later and no one's answering the phone. This is where the AI tool helps too, because it can go, here's the status of your car. But those are the things, it's just people value their time and they want to be felt like we're treating them fairly. And when we break that level of trust, then we lose that customer.
Okay, one more question. Back to the manufacturers. You mentioned that they have a lot of data that's helping them figure out where they can load up the cost on which brands. How much impact do you have, or does Asbury have? I mean, you're a big player in the U.S. market. Do you have ability to influence any of those decisions, and how does that work?
0.
Okay.
They do their own thing. We do sit on a couple of the boards for the OEMs, but ultimately we're a franchisee and they make the decisions on what they produce and what they price it at. And our only feedback we give is they recognize the sale when they sell it to us. Then I have to sell it to a consumer. So at some point, if they send me too many cars, I stop and I won't take any more. That's the only feedback we can give, is that we stop purchasing the cars.
Hi, I sit on the team underneath Jonathan, so I'm going to ask a question that actually pertains more to this team over here who does the actual data work. But we've been focusing a lot on how the wealthier households in America are holding up the new vehicle market. You all made the Park Place acquisition, the Herb Chambers acquisition, both really smart and luxury. Jimmy Coon's great selection to get more mass market brands, considering that ATP is hitting over $50,000, and knowing that these brands, Hyundais, Kias, Fords, all of the mass market brands are also north of that average transaction price. Was some of that not just recession-proof areas, but also figuring out what other brands might now be new luxury, considering that perhaps those people might start perceiving Mercedes, BMW as ultra luxury, given where those ATPs might go. I'm just curious how you're balancing the wealthy customers who are even having to come down as well in what they're wanting to purchase.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting over the next couple of years. Does the entry-level customer have to buy used? Is that just where it shapes out with tariffs and everything else? And so you end up with your entry-level customer as a used car buyer, then you have the luxury beginning stage, and that's kind of your normal cars, Toyotas, all those things, and then your ultra-luxury for the ultra-luxury guys. I do think we're shifting that way just with the cost of the cars. So it'll be interesting how that plays out, especially with tariffs. But that's definitely strategic as we think through the markets. The West is the one oddball one. But out there's just so few dealerships for the population that you're going to get more revenue per dealership, which then help offset that luxury mix. But definitely you saw it in the Park Place acquisition, Coons, and in Chambers. We were definitely focused on that stable customer that's going to be able to afford those cars.
I think do you have a question over
Yeah.
here? Over there. Mike.
Hey. So Jonathan mentioned, and you just hit it again, and her question also alluded to the price of the vehicle, so average price going up, but a chunk of it, this is more of a comment than a question, but that we're losing the bottom end. Mm-hmm. So the price of the vehicle, back to Jonathan's point of it's all about segment, it isn't as much the price of the vehicle as escalated dramatically from 33 to 50, is we lost the bottom end.
Yeah.
We've also seen the SAR come down. It's probably going to stay in this 16 or whatever, according to Jonathan, and I obviously respect their numbers, and it's well sourced. Are we going to lose a portion of the market by having it's a prime borrower only market? Kind of talk to that.
Yeah.
Odd dynamic, because at some point and again, you guys aren't necessarily in the used car business, you're more focused on new, but if you're still only selling these higher end, larger vehicles, at some point, the pipeline, there just aren't vehicles, or they have to be much, much older for the used market. So kind of
Yeah,
hit
those are
that.
great questions. And I do think it's, the only good thing now is like, if you go back 10 years ago, if I was going to sell used, so we sell about, we're almost 1-to-1 on used to new. So in our stores, we sell kind of equal number of both. If I had a car come in with 150,000 miles 10 years ago, I couldn't sell it because it just wasn't, the quality wasn't there, it wasn't going to last much longer, it was a different car. Now, I can sell those cars in that 100 to 150 to 175,000 because they're just better made. So we've seen the average age of the car has gone up, but the quality of the car has gone up too, so you can sustain it. So I think you're right, you're going to see this kind of new car buyer, CPO buyer, which is, call it, 2 to 3 year old car. Then you're going to see that 5+ year old car, and that's going to be kind of that lower segment. But we saw it with Ford. Ford got rid of all the entry level cars. They went all SUV. They pushed the price points up because they couldn't make money on those low priced cars. And that segment's just almost gone away. So I do think we're going to see a shift. And tariffs are going to, it's harder to produce that low priced car with the tariffs. I mean, you could produce it in Mexico and bring it across. You could produce it in other places and make it work. It's going to be tough to make that car work financially for them. And depends on, the only reason they used to produce it was I had to sell enough of the high fuel economy cars to offset the F-150, which I made all the money on. And the balance of those two, I could make the math work to still make a profit for Ford. But they lost money on every single car they produced. But they had to do it to get the fuel economy. So whatever they do on the fuel economy is going to shape it out a little bit. But it's going to be interesting. I think the next couple of years, you're going to see what you said. There's going to be this kind of different price points that are going to force that entry-level buyer into a used car.
They gave me the mic back. So speaking of lower cost cars, do you have any prediction on what's going to happen with China?
It's a great question. So on the cheap EV space, they dominate. And they have a few manufacturers that were looking to come into the US a couple of years ago, and then it wasn't the right timing for them. And we of course look at all those opportunities, and they make some unbelievable cars that the price point's just unreal. Politically, I'm not sure how that's going to work out in the short term, but they are ahead of the rest of the space in terms of producing a low-priced, at least on the EV side, especially EV vehicles. But it'd be challenging to come in this environment.